And welcome back to the Apex Academy. I'm David Liu, your loyal teacher, and welcome to my favorite module of them all. Today, we'll be talking about a fan favorite topic, Apex test classes. If you're not familiar with test classes, this course is for you and you're in for a treat. We're going to teach you everything you need to know to understand what test classes are and how to write your own from scratch. Here's an overview of the topics we'll be covering during this module. First, we'll teach you all the basics of test classes, what they are, why we have to write them, and what are their specific requirements. Next, we'll write test classes for two of the triggers we wrote in the previous module, Hello World and Apple Watch. Then, we'll take an inside look at how Salesforce calculates our test coverage. This is key to understanding how we can meet test class requirements. Finally, we'll wrap up by summarizing the 4 commandments of test classes and apply them to our final test class for our dedupe reminder trigger. Let's jump right in and talk about test classes, the most beautiful yet most misunderstood part of coding in Salesforce. What are test classes? In plain English, a test class is simply Apex code that tests other Apex code. So say you've written a trigger. A test class would simply be companion code that makes sure your trigger works. Let me paint for you an analogy that might help you better understand this. Remember our Hello World trigger? The trigger that updated a lead's first name to hello and the lead's last name to world? Well, what's the first thing we did after writing our Hello World trigger? Well, the first thing was to make sure the trigger worked by 1, manually going into the Salesforce UI, 2, manually updating a lead, and 3, manually checking that our lead's name was updated. Once we manually verified that the lead's name was updated according to our expectations, we gave ourselves a pat on the back for writing a working trigger. And remember our Apple Watch trigger? The trigger that created a new task whenever a new opportunity was created to remind ourselves to send our potential customers a free Apple Watch? Well, what was the first thing we did after writing this trigger? First, we manually went into the Salesforce UI. Then we manually created a new opportunity. And finally, we manually checked to see that an Apple Watch task was automatically created. Again, once things passed the eyeball test, we concluded that we've written a successful trigger. Final example, what did we do immediately after writing our dedupe reminder trigger? Our trigger that automatically created a case to remind our new intern Joe to dedupe every new account. Well, of course, we verified our trigger worked by 1, manually going into the Salesforce UI, 2, manually creating an account, which is the object our after insert trigger ran on, and 3, manually checking to see that a case was automatically created on our account according to our expectations. I hope you're starting to see a pattern here. That's right. We've been following a general testing pattern. And let me summarize our testing flow for you. These are the steps we naturally took after writing each trigger because we wanted to verify it worked. First, we created or modified test records. For example, we created a new account for our dedupe reminder trigger. Then, as a result of this action, our trigger ran. Dedupe reminder was an after insert trigger on accounts, so creating a new account forced this trigger to run. Finally, we verified our trigger worked by eyeballing the results and manually inspecting fields and records to see that they were updated properly. Notice that these steps were the same for any trigger we wrote, but more importantly, they'd be the same for any trigger we'll ever write as well. But while these manual testing steps are a great method of ensuring our code works, they have a fatal flaw. They rely on manual work by humans. And if you've ever worked with as many humans as I have, you know that humans are a beautiful yet unreliable, unpredictable species. Oh, yeah, they like to complain, and you need to feed them and pay them to keep them happy. That's why we prefer to leave testing up to the robots, aka our test classes. Yes, test classes are our army of robots programmed to do one thing: automate the predictable, manual process we've been doing to verify our code worked. These loyal, faithful robots will do everything we used to manually do, but better. And best of all, they'll never complain about how boring their job is, and they always execute with perfect, predictable accuracy. For each of our triggers, we can program its very own robot test class that'll create new records, run its trigger, and double check that it worked. 100% precision with zero drama. I only wish we could build an army of robots to do all the rest of our manual work in Salesforce. Oh, wait, that's why we're learning how to write triggers.